the pictures, hopefully so. Right, so this week we're going to be talking about character, which is, I kind of led into this last week, and I hope that you're all interested in developing characters, because that's like sort of how you get to your story a lot of times. And oh yes, it worked. And as usual, I like to do the jump into writing thing, which is where I give you a little writing exercise to start with. So if you have all your pens and papers out, let's start with that. And this one is imagine the relationships. Wow, this does not want to get out to the side here. I'm going to go like that. Imagine the relationships between these children. So if you can, try and become one of the children and write a dialogue for him or her. And then if you can, answer this question: what do you understand, the character obviously, or know that no one else does? And then what's going to happen next? So this might just be a few things that you write down, or it might be, you know, more than a few things, but I'm going to give you 5 minutes. So pen to paper, chop, chop. Rafal, you know I'm going to ask you to read, so you got to get it done.
I'm done. I'm ready.
Oh, you're already ready? Gosh. All right, we've only got 2 more minutes, so go as fast as you can. Just write whatever comes out. It's all right. All right, so start winding up your story. Just a few more seconds, actually. So just start winding it up. Put in your last sentence. All right, so what we've been talking about these past few weeks is the idea that stories built around connection, and that connection is essential to a story, right? You can't, or it's difficult to have a story that doesn't have connection to anything, to landscape, to place, to people, to emotion, right? It's all about the connections and the disconnections. And so in this story, we've got a little bunch of kids actually in Outback Australia, and I'm wondering what you could tell us from your writing. What did you write? Who would like to go first?
I would begin,
Rafael put up
whatever.
his hand first. Good job.
I think we should rotate, otherwise someone is going to fall off the swing. We don't care. We will be all on there. If there's no risk, there's no fun. But the risk is not fun, really. You will see. But I think that one of the children is going to fall off the swing because it's so crowded.
Aha. And which one were you, Rafael?
I don't know. I didn't think that. I choose one. I choose to write as a children, but I didn't figure it out which one.
Right. Okay. So that's actually helpful to know, because in general, when you're writing a character, you're writing somebody very specific. You know who you're writing about. You choose this person for a variety of different reasons, but you choose a specific, concrete person. So did somebody choose a specific, concrete person and write about them? Raduca?
Yeah. So I focused on the brown-haired girl in the forefront and the blonde girl standing. And anyway, so me, please get off. The blonde-haired girl is Julie. Julie, why? I don't want to. It's my turn. Who says so? Everyone else is smirking, a little surprised at Julie's courage to face me. Amelia is starting to cry. It's not fair. You guys have been there for, wait a second. No, sorry. It's me. The point is, as you just said, that I should be one of the characters. I'm trying to switch it because I was just doing the two. Anyway, it's not fair. I started to cry. It's not fair. You guys have been there for a long time. It's not fair. Toby is approaching the swing from the back. He winks at me. I'm a bit confused and worried because Toby is known to start fights. I don't want to be like him. And
that was good. Okay, so Raduca, what you did is, yes, you have this one kid. You have a good dialogue happening. You also have this character. Your character sees the boy approaching from the back, so the character knows something that nobody else knows. Well done. Okay, so that was really good. Somebody else? Wait, is there somebody else who's willing to read?
I can go.
Oh, yay, Sarah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to swing us all the most. You don't have to help me push. I don't need your help. And then that's the extent of the dial, like what the character says. And then the character thinks inside of her head that she's waiting for that small hiccup in the swing to happen. And as soon as she feels that little hiccup, she's going to stop and jump off.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so that's really good. So again, you have the dialogue, you have the conflict between the kids, you have the character knows something that other people on the swing don't know, that there's going to be this little hiccup, and she's going to jump off. Right, she knows what's going to happen next also. So when you know those things in advance, when you're writing and you know those things, it's actually really helpful because it keeps the ball rolling. Like you have certain things, like kind of things that you're juggling, and you know how to move forward. If you don't have these things right in the start of a story, it's actually relatively hard to move the story forward. You have to kind of keep on inventing new things again and again, instead of having actual things that are there already that just keep on unrolling. So that's really good. Did anybody else want to read?
Yeah, well,
Yay, Penny, go.
me and the neighbourhood kids had walked to the local park and discovered the sleigh swing that all but Tessa protesting that she couldn't get on. That's set up. I want to tell you something about Tessa. This girl and I lived in each other's pocket, and she told me everything, and I mean everything. For instance, I knew that her dad was having an affair with the neighbour's wife and got her pregnant. Yikes. Who to tell?
That's great. Okay, that is awesome, Penny. Good job. So here's this little kid, right, who has a dialogue, knows something that other people don't know. What will happen next, right? So all of those things kind of propel the story forward. You've given yourself a lot to work with if you start with these simple ideas of a group of people having a conversation. One of them knows something that other people don't know. What happens next? And like, that's a relatively simple way to propel a story, right? There's other ways of doing it, but that's a pretty simple one that all of you can do. Brenda, did you want to read something? Nope. Okay, no problem. All right, so I'm going to move forward. Here we go. So when you're developing the idea of the story, you're like kind of trying to figure out, and we talked about this in previous classes. Some of you were there for them, some of you weren't. But what's the most important choice your character must make in the story you've imagined, right? So in the case of, let's say, Penny's story, is the most important choice who she's going to tell, or is the most important choice will she tell? What do you think?
Will she tell?
Depends how the writer writes it.
Mm.
It could be will she tell, it could be who she tells, it could be what she tells. Right? So it all depends on what the writer goes with. But ultimately there will be a choice. And remember, we really talked about this idea that stories are built around choice. So what pressures might make, let's continue to talk about this same story, because when you have something concrete to talk about, it's easier. What pressures make that choice difficult? What might make it hard for that little girl on the swing to tell all about what she knows about the neighborhood gossip? Sarah?
What pressures make that choice difficult? I think that what the dynamic is with all those kids, like if she's the one being bullied to not allowed to get on the swing, and I think that would be if she's feeling like she can't get on the swing and the other girl's on the swing, that would be a pressure for her to maybe to tell, so that girl would jump off and cry and go away.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's one pressure. Anybody else? Good job.
Maybe one kid is part of the family that they're talking about, or
yeah, right. One kid is part of the family. How about the idea that, like, if she tells, all the kids are going to hate her, and she's anyway isolated, so why would you tell then, right? So that would complicate the situation as well. So like, your job as a writer is to really think about those pressures and make them real, right? What makes the pressures real on the story? So then, what would be a memory? These are all like things that writers would think, like, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? The great what if is the classic thing that writers ask themselves, but what if this? What if that? You know, so what's a memory from the past that might make your reader understand your character's choices better? So again, let's work with this story that we just talked about, Penny's story, just because it is a juicy one. What might be a memory from the past that makes your reader understand your character's choices better? So let's say that she does, in fact, blurt this out to this little, the playground full of kids. So what would be a memory from the past that would make that choice more understandable to the reader? What do you think? You're just inventing now. There's no right or wrong answer.
Can you remind me what the actual thing is? Like, what is the conflict here?
Yeah, sure. So
Remember.
there's a little girl. Tell me if I'm wrong here, Penny, but there's a little girl, and she's thinking she wants to get onto the swing. She can't get onto the swing, and she thinks, well, you mob of losers, you don't know what I know. I know that the next door neighbor is having an affair with this other person and got them pregnant, right? So there's this scandalous gossip in what looks like a small country town. She has this scandalous gossip, and now she's going to spill it. Let's say she does spill it. Now what? What's a memory from the past that makes your reader understand your character's choices better? So she made a choice. She tells this scandalous gossip. Why would she do that? What do you think?
There was another time when she did it, and it worked in her favor.
Excellent. Okay, yeah, that's great, Rodrigo. That's a great example. What else? There's lots of ideas here. They're all right.
Maybe she felt, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Any thoughts on this? So like, let's say that as a little kid, when she told the truth, her father gave her lollies, candies, right? So in that case, she'd be like, oh, if I tell the truth, good things are going to come my way, right? So that's a very simplistic child's thought, but it still could totally work in a story like this. If the story is being told from a child's perspective, then you could also like throw that in there, and it would make sense. We'd be like, oh yeah, so that makes sense psychologically. And the reason that you put those kind of things into the story is because you want to make the character real. You want to make them seem like a real human being who has a background, who has a past that's influencing their current day, right? We all make choices. I don't know about you guys. I make some terrible choices. And when I make those terrible choices, a lot of times it's some stuff from the past that maybe helped me make those choices. Or if I make good choices, similarly, it might have come from something that came from the past. Rodrigo, you look like you want to say something.
Yes, I'm very tempted to put a layer on this that actually she's lying, and she realized along the way that if she tells this white lies or whatever, that she gets to be more interesting or whatever. But I would like to take her also that she's a bit of a, like, stirs thing up and just to draw attention, a bit of a drama queen.
Excellent. Okay, so right. So now, Raduca, what you're doing and what storytellers do is you start to think about all these different aspects of character. You start to think about, well, this could have happened and that might have happened and this might be true and that might be true. And the more you kind of layer on there, the more real the person becomes, the more the real the character becomes. Because when you write them down, right, on a piece of paper, they're very literally flat. They're two-dimensional. They're just a piece of writing. But once you start to add these details in, they become real. They become often very similar to people that maybe you know. So I'm going to actually not have you do this last bit, which is make a quick list of images associated with that memory, since there were just two of you who sort of wanted to dive into this, and we're going to go to the next page. Here we go. So this is the interview, and this was somebody's work who sent me their work. Thank you to the person. If you want to identify yourself, you may. And last week I invited you to write an interview between yourself and your main character. So here's the sample. It says, Penny, do you want to read that out loud?
Yeah.
Thanks.
She wanted to create the space for a conversation, almost an interview of sorts, where I would ask her about her experience. I could ask her about the room, the one I met her in last, the one she lived in for many years. I could ask what it was like and why she stayed for so long, how she got into it and how she left. but I feel that wouldn't be kind of right now. She left to come here so I could ask her about where she lives now. Even this doesn't feel right. Instead, we sit together for the evening and see what comes.
Excellent. So before I say anything else about this piece of writing, I just want to say that the person really put beautiful rhythms into this piece of writing. This piece of writing sings, it has music. And so I really want to appreciate that experiment. If that was an experiment, it's really lovely to read. But I also want to ask a really important question. What do we know, and I mean concrete, not just thought-wise, what do we know concrete about this character right now? Brenda, are you putting up your hand or are you yawning? She's yawning.
That she's
What do you think?
ambivalent? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Raduca. What's that?
That she's ambivalent?
She is ambivalent, but
Okay.
like, I mean like concrete details, not sort of the
Oh.
emotional part of it. I'm just talking about concrete details. What do we know? It's okay not to put up your hands. There aren't any. Sarah, go ahead.
They were together in one room.
Yeah, they're together in one room. Yeah. Sarah, what else?
Yeah, I was going to say that this person that she lived in a room,
Yeah.
and we know that.
Yeah. Right. So in general, when you're reading a passage, especially when it's an interview between people, what you're hoping to convey is a steady stream of concrete information, not just the emotional information, which is like backpacking or piggybacking on the concrete details, but that steady flow of concrete details keeps your reader anchored in the work itself. And so the more, I call it heady, the more heady something is, like up there in the abstract world, the less the reader wants to read. They kind of jump out of the work. The more concrete it is, the more there's this steady flow of images that kind of move past the reader and it hooks them into it, because like we are used to a steady stream of visual imagery because that's how we gain most of our information. And so in writing, you really have to echo that idea, a steady flow of concrete visual information in order to keep the reader in the work. And that's true even with speech and thought. We're still needing fairly concrete information to keep you hooked into the work. Okay, any questions on that before I move on? Because it's a funny thought. You don't think about speech or even thoughts as being concrete. You think about them as being sort of these abstract things that are out here somewhere, but they're not. They actually have to be fairly concrete in order to be effective. Okay. So I'm going to ask you this. This is like a little exercise. Could you guys tell me an anecdote, or tell us all, an anecdote about a family member and how that expresses something about their character? So if you're not going to start, I'll start, because I want you. Oh, yay, Brenda. Thank God.
For one, my mouth hurts, just so you know.
Your mouth hurts? What happened?
I don't know, it just hurts to talk. So by anecdote, you mean like a story, right?
Yeah, just a real quick story about like something about a character, or somebody that you know, or a family member that sort of tells us something about their character.
Like, what? Oh.
Yeah, like what they're like. Yeah.
Well,
Oh, you got
my one time, when we just got my dog Basil, he squirmed so much he came right out of my arms, landed on the concrete.
So he's a squirmy dog.
Also, when he first met my uncle, he got so excited he peed on him.
Oh yeah, okay, so that is actually very character. And again, these are both very concrete examples, right, peeing on the foot and squirming so much that you jump down onto the concrete. These are really concrete examples that kind of demonstrate something about the character of your dog. Good job, Brenda. Anybody else? Everyone's like, I'm not telling you stories about my family. Here, I'll tell you a story. Okay, so this is about my uncle Alex. Alex, I'm talking about you right now if you're watching. So Alex is from Romania. This is for you also, Raduca. So Alex is from Romania and he's hilarious. He's always like so funny. And he came to a bar mitzvah in my house and a lot of people were all sitting around. And all of a sudden he got up and he takes out his credit card from his wallet. And on the back of it are these little tiny spirals of white, which I didn't know. They kind of stuck to the back of his credit card. And I'm like, that's weird. I don't know what that is. And then he takes them off and he said, I have floss. It's very good for you. I have floss. You can. And he starts demonstrating in this very formal group of people how to floss your teeth. So that's a family story about my Uncle Alex. He's a character and he actually likes to do things that kind of are a little provocative. And so that's something that he did. And I think it's hilarious because he is really health conscious, but he's also hilarious. So this concrete detail of having the little spirals of white dental floss on the back of his credit card kind of expressed something about who he is as a person, as a character. So anybody else want to go? Raduca.
I do not have so many anecdotes about my family, actually.
It's okay. Raduca said she'd go.
So I want to honor my father-in-law with this story. When I first, I don't know if I was married yet to my husband, but his family is very much into their heads and not into the emotions. And I used to always or I still do, when I go to people, I give them a hug. So every time I go into the house, I will have to chase him around the house because he will hide away from me to get the hug. And I kept at it and I kept at it. And in spite of really, I would just sort of literally hug him and he would turn around. But years passed, or whatever, maybe not that many years. And then I could see that actually he was looking forward to it. And he would come and that was him. He would say, I'm such an idiot, because I mean, in a bit of self-deprecating way, but meaning that he's wrong, that he was wrong about this or the other. So anyway, that's a little.
I love that story. That's a great story. Yes. Okay. So that's the same. That's what I'm looking for. So these are the kind of things, you already have an entire novel. You have many entire novels of these kind of family anecdotes that express something about character that you can move away from your actual family members and adjust and put into a story. These things really tell us something. They're really simple things often, right? So in the case of Raduca chasing her father-in-law to give him a hug, I love that because it really tells us of, first of all, his initial, I guess, headiness, resistance, but then his being won over by it is also very charming. It's like this very charming thing. So it does express something about character, and I would recommend for you guys, if you're thinking about developing character, you can even get a little notebook and make a list of these anecdotes. Tiny things, tiny details about people that are expressive of character are really helpful because they're the unusual things. I had one time a student in one of my classes and she was from Russia and she said, oh, the thing that I remember about my grandmother was she was so cheap, she said. She was so cheap that she used to use a crochet hook and she would recrochet her nylon stockings. And she would pull up the thing the whole way up the ladder until it was fixed again. And I said, oh, you mean cotton, cotton stockings or wool stockings? She said, no, the really cheap nylon ones, when she came to the United States. And I loved it. I actually didn't think that was cheap. I just actually thought it was thrifty and good. But it was very indicative of her character, so that if you had a character in the story who was sitting there, you don't have to say anything about them. You just have to have them doing that action. All of a sudden, we know something about that character. It's interesting, I think. What do you think? No? Yes?
Yeah.
So silent.
Yeah,
Okay.
the sound
right.
of silence.
Yeah, the sound of silence. So again, this is concrete details. This is not me saying that person is thrifty. It's a detail. It's just a visual image of the person, let's say, re-crocheting or re-knitting the stockings. So what makes I'm just checking the time here so we have enough time. What makes a character real? So character is made up of these different aspects. And this is direct characterization. There's also indirect characterization, which I'm not going to address here. I'm just going to talk about this thing here, which is appearance, action, dialogue, and thought. And some of these we've already talked about in class. We've already talked about dialogue. To a certain extent, we've already talked about action. We haven't really talked about appearance, and we haven't really talked about thought. But intriguingly, unlike real people we probably know 0.004% of anything about them, right? Even people that we've lived with for many, many years, we know just a little window about them. We don't necessarily know everything about them. So unlike real people, fictional people do not necessarily need to be screened by privacy and secrecy. One of the real pleasures of reading fiction is that sense of intimacy and sharing, and the sharing of an inner world, because the screen comes off. We get to find out much more about, let's say, a character in a book than we might ever find out about our neighbor or our mother or our cousin or anybody like that, right? And so that's interesting. And if you as the writer hold back on that, you're actually depriving your reader of one of the joys of reading. I want to say this again, that one of the real joys of reading is being able to connect on that deep level, to see yourself, your inner world, which is turbulent. Everybody's inner world is turbulent. You can see that in another character if you, the writer, does a good job of writing it. So I think that's cool. I like that. That's one of the reasons I write. Anyway, so going back to this idea, was Pinocchio real? Was he? And if so, can you tell me why or why not? Everybody knows who Pinocchio is, right?
He developed as a character.
I don't think he's real because each time he's lying, his nose is growing.
Okay. How does that say that he's not real?
He's real in the book, but it could not be a real life character.
Okay, maybe. But a lot of people feel like he's real, Raphael. A lot of people feel like he's real, and probably the reason is because, let's go back here.
He developed as a character.
What's that?
He developed as a character.
He develops as a character, but what else? Oops, that's not right. I'm going the wrong way now.
He shows emotion.
Here's what makes a character seem real. Appearance. Do we know something about the appearance of Pinocchio? You talked about his nose, Raphael, right? You talked about how his nose grows longer. So that's appearance. We know something about his appearance. He's not.
Yes, he's lying sometimes.
Yeah, you talked about, right, in defining him, you gave us his nose grows, he lies. Dialogue would also include lying, right? Yes, I think I have you here. And thought. So without thought, a character doesn't seem real. And the reason for that is because we know we're real, we hope we're real, right? And we have thoughts. We look like something, we do things, we speak, and we think. So these are the ways that when you're writing a character, you demonstrate the reality of that character. If you don't have appearance, action, dialogue, and thought, the sense is that the character is no longer real. And so, as always, this class was specifically set up for you guys around the work that was handed in to me. So I want you to understand that if you're trying to create a character, these things, these small things, and they're small concrete things, appearance, action, dialogue, and thought, are essential to creating a character that I want to read about. And I do want to read about the characters. Right? So, and let's take a look at the Velveteen Rabbit, right? So the Velveteen Rabbit, I think maybe just Rafal won't know who that is. Does anybody else not know who the Velveteen Rabbit is? Okay, so Velveteen Rabbit is a rabbit that wants to be real, very similar to Pinocchio, and he's made real through the boy's love. But the Velveteen Rabbit has what? What are the 4 things that create a real feeling character? Anybody?
In that story, the rabbit got really worn out physically. You had to see that he was.
Appearance? Yeah. What else?
Thoughts.
What else?
Action, thoughts.
He moves, right? He does stuff. Yeah, action.
Thoughts.
Thoughts. He thinks about things. He worries. Yes. And what else?
What was that on?
He goes and he talks to the leather horse and stuff, right? So there's conversation. So there's dialogue. And that's true for the straw man, let's say in The Wizard of Oz, and many other different stories where the character theoretically isn't real, but the writer makes the character real because the writer grants them thoughts, speech, action, and appearance. That's how you create a real character. Okay.
So is that, in other words, to say that we give human attributes to either objects or animals to because we basically are talking to other humans who are going to read. So that's a way of communicating.
Yes.
And that way they feel more human, or they can relate to.
That's excellent. Yeah. That's anthropomorphism is exactly that. It's granting human attributes to non-human things in order to create the sense that they are real. And that's true. Like I tried one time to write a story. In fact, I've tried many times to write a story about sperm whales without anthropomorphizing them. And it's insanely challenging. And it hasn't been published for a reason. Anyway. Right. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next slide. And the next slide is about this sensory impressions. So we talked before about how to create sensory impressions using the senses, because that, again, is the way to connect with the reader. The way that you're able to convey information to the reader is not through this kind of heady business. It's all about my experience of the world right now is a sensory experience. If I look around, I'm seeing things. If I talk, I am hearing things. If I can taste things, if I take a sip of my seltzer, I am smelling the smell of my room, and I can feel the chair that I'm sitting in my butt, with my butt. So that is my experience right now. It's a sensory experience. If you want your reader to be in the place of the story, if you want your reader to experience the character, then you're going to convey that with sensory information. And the sensory information is not just there, oh, here's a story. It's to kind of hook the reader into the story. So if I say that I'm on a bus, this is a story, right? If I say I'm on a bus and in front of me there's a gentleman who has really dirty hair and it smells faintly of seaweed, right? So me as the character and you as the reader feel involved. You're like, what can I do about that? What should happen now? You're not just going to sit there and be like, oh yeah, hair that smells like seaweed is totally normal. No, you're going to start thinking some thoughts, like you want to do something about it. And so that's kind of involving the reader. Or in the case of, like, let's say Joyce Carol Oates' story, Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been?, which is a very well-known story. She creates this character, Arnold Friend, who is missing parts of himself. And by missing parts of himself, when she describes him, there are giant chunks of his body that are missing. And as a result, you as the reader add in those giant chunks of his body, and you add them in because you already know that Arnold Friend is not a friend. He's not a nice man. You add them in with your own version of what's scary. And so that's another way that writers can do that. So we're not going to address that right here. That would be my master's level class. But that is a possibility, right? That's something that you can do. So it also illustrates attitude. So either the narrator's attitude or the character's attitude about things. So I want you to take a second, choose a character, any character that you want, and I want you to describe this character in a few unique sentences using sensory information. So I really, really, really want you to avoid something like, she has brown curly hair, is mid-height, mid-weight, and sort of smiling, because you just described half the world. Choose things about the character that are different than everybody else. She may very well have brown curly hair, but you're not going to mention it. You're going to mention that exceptionally large brown wart on the side of her face, because very few people have that. You're going to choose the things that, as an observer, you would notice because they're different, not because they're the same. So a few sentences. Where you go? And don't forget, I said sensory impression, sensory information. So smell, taste, touch, hearing, seeing.
That's so weird.
You never gave someone a handshake, or, you know, went to give somebody a handshake and it was this instead of this?
It would be funny if someone gets out a fish, but I never had that situation.
In English, you say somebody shakes hands like it's like a fish, because their hand is too weak. You know, it's not a nice, strong handshake.
Hey, thanks.
Okay, so I just wanted you guys to spend just write a couple of sentences using your senses to convey character, or to convey the appearance of a character. So does somebody have something that they wanted to read out? Yeah, Brenda, go.
Her face was dotted in freckles. She smelled of freshly cut roses. Her hair was soft like velvet.
Nice. Okay, that's a great example. So I can really feel what you're describing because you use the senses, right? Good job. Somebody else?
I can go.
Yay, Sarah, go.
Okay, I watched her figure sway from side to side as she walked up the hill. The sun was beaming on her black pants, absorbing the rays, and when she came close, she was warm to touch.
Oh, I love it. That's beautiful, actually. Well done. Yeah, that's great. Somebody else?
I'll go.
Okay, go ahead, Penny.
She's the sweetest thing. She's the sweetest thing. For instance, when you speak to her everything goes to her. Sorry. Her eyes go soft and blinky. Her mouth moves into a smile. She will snuggle her head into your lap using her whole body weight to move in.
I love it. Yes, perfect. That's exactly right. That's what you're looking for. That's exactly what you're looking for. When you're writing about somebody or something, right, you're looking for those, I want to say, delicious sensory details that just bring your reader right there and really convey that. So well done, all of you. Anybody else wanted to go? Nope. Okay, so I'm going to move on. So this is just a reiteration of that idea. All senses convey appearance. And if you give examples of visual, auditory, tactile, gustatory, or olfactory details that convey the appearance of the character. So I put this fishy handshake there because, like, you don't really think of tactile, although you, Sarah, you just gave such a great example of a tactile experience, right, of somebody. But usually tactile is one of the last ones that people will use. And yet it's often something that we feel very connected to, the tactile sense, right? So if somebody, let's say somebody puts out their hand and you go to shake it and it's the floppy fish thing, that conveys a certain kind of character as opposed to, let's say, the nice firm handshake or whatever it is, right? And on the opposite side of that, the guy who, like, not just grabs your hand but grips it until you're like, ah, tears are coming down, right? Again, a different character. So I want to make sure that we have enough time to finish. So one of the other things is action being a very important part of the character, right? So stories record this process of change that happens through a series of escalating actions that are either taken or rejected. Now, we talked about that already in class, but I'm going to give this really, oh man, I typed this up so badly. I'm looking at all the typos. Anyway, so this is an example from Raymond Carver's work, Neighbors, and in it, you can literally see each sentence, the progression of change that happens through it, and the progression of choices that the main character, whose name is Bill Miller, makes as you move through it. So I'm going to read it and kind of highlight how that happens. When he returned to the kitchen, the cat was scratching in her box. Okay, so that's a very neutral sentence. She looked at him steadily for a minute before she turned back to the litter. So right there we get a sense that he's being observed and he doesn't necessarily like it. He opened all the cupboards and examined the canned goods, the cereals, the packaged foods, the cocktail and wine glasses, the china, the pots and pans. So to give you some sense, he's invaded his neighbor's house and he's opening the cupboards, right? So each step, first he's just in the kitchen, but now he's opening cupboards and looking at stuff, right? So each step of the way is a new advance in, well, you know, first he just kind of invaded the house, but now he's opening the cupboards. Wow, that's another step. And then, oh man, another typo. He opened the refrigerator. He sniffed some celery, right? So opening the refrigerator is just like, okay, now it's similar to the cupboard, but it's maybe a little more personal. But now he sniffs the celery, took 2 bites of cheddar cheese and chewed on an apple. Okay, I wouldn't be happy to find an intruder who's done those things in my house. As he walked into the bedroom. Okay, so new level of invasion, right? The bed seemed enormous with the fluffy white bedspread draped to the floor. Also not so great. You know, he's in the bedroom now. He pulled out a nightstand drawer. That's a whole nother level. Found a half-empty packet of cigarettes, and now he steals and stuffs them into his pocket. Right? Each one of these things is a new heightened level of choice, right? So this action is moving along pretty fast. Then he stepped to the closet and was just opening it when ... right? Actually, somebody knocks on the door. So he's about to get into the closet and hide in there. So that's a whole nother level. So this paragraph, it's a single paragraph, and yet the writer has moved this character through a series of escalating actions that are, in this case, taken. He takes all of them, right? So that's what I really want you to understand, that in a paragraph, you're not just sitting in the same place talking about how you'd like to get on the bus. You're actually moving through a series of escalating actions. And the more you're able to do that, the more interesting that is for your readers. And then the next thing is dialogue. So speech, right? We talked about dialogue in this class. It's an attempt to externalize the internal. What internal? What is Goldie talking about? Brenda.
Thoughts or what their or inner conversations they're having with themselves.
Yeah.
Like, don't do that, or what made you think that was a good idea? I'm sorry, I panicked.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So a person's internal sense of themselves is conveyed in the way that they speak. And these are just two of the main ideas that I hope I gave over in the section of dialogue, and I'm just revisiting it. So what a pleasure to meet you comes out of a different character than, hey man, what's up? So let's take a look at Calvin for a second, because I know there are some of you here who like Calvin, myself included. So based solely on his dialogue, what kind of a person is Calvin? So here's Calvin. He's looking at this and he says, sometimes I think the surest sign that intelligent life exists elsewhere in the universe is that none of it has tried to contact us. If you didn't see a picture of a little boy there, would you think that's a little boy talking? No. Right? Right. Would you think it's some kind of like philosophical academic? Possibly. Yeah. Somebody who's like curious about things, a higher value speaker, right? Definitely not a little child who likes to throw his wagon off the side of a hill and make bad choices, right? So there's that neat conflict between who he actually is, this little child, and the language, right? That's cool. I like it. Okay, so moving right along, because we just have a few more minutes. And last but not least, thought. So thought is actually what I think of as the most important part of this little group of 4 things that convey character, because thought, that internal part of the character, is the thing that you don't necessarily get in the external world. You get that in the world of books. And the world of books is able to give you something that you can't get elsewhere. When you say, I'm an armchair tourist about reading a book, what you mean is you get to go on a tour of this, the inside of somebody's head or the inside of somebody's heart. And that's really interesting because we don't get to do that elsewhere. So the better you're able to convey thought, the better you're able to create that armchair tour of this or this. Right? So like in speech, thought should convey more than just information. It also sets the scene and the mood, reveals motivation, betrays contradictions, and creates themes, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so in the case of this Calvin comic right here, it says, go ahead down, you'll miss all those trees. This is all his thoughts, right? That's thought balloons coming out there. Do you see the trees? Are there trees in this picture?
don't.
No.
I don't see trees.
There's no trees. So that thought balloon just conveyed setting. You can do it. You'll stop before you go over that ledge at the bottom. Do you see the ledge? Again, it's conveying setting, right? It's betraying contradictions. You won't go into that pond. Besides, the ice is probably real thick anyway. Go ahead down. Again, setting. We don't see those things. We even see mood at this point. And then last but not least, he actually says something. My brain is trying to kill me. So I think that's clever because all of that is this. We know something about Calvin. We understand something about the environment that he's in, the mood, even the motivation, all of it from thoughts. That's clever. That's a great example of what books can do, or cartoons in this case, that are hard to show in the external world, hard to show elsewhere. All right, so I don't know if we have time for this. I might just skip over this. Bloop. Yeah, I'm going to go straight to this. And I'd like you to come up. This is try it at home. Oh, what did I just do? Let me go back to this here and put that into, I don't know how to do it. Anyway, I give up on that. Come up with a list of things that you want.
If not slideshow next to gallery.
When I go there, it pops down again.
Next to new slide and before gallery.
Yeah, it's not. This thing, the bar comes down, and I don't know how to make it go back. Oh well. It doesn't matter because you guys can see this anyway. So I want you to. Oh, there it is. Okay, let me see if I can sneak it in there. Oh yes. No, it went to the wrong thing. Oh my gosh. Go to slide this 14. There we go. Thank you, Rafal. So I want you to see if you can do this. Come up with a list of things that you want that are at odds with other things that you want. So for example, I'd really like to be 20 pounds less than I am right now, but I also really like chocolate, like really like it. So can you write a paragraph or two? That's a very simple example, but there are really complicated examples that are the basis of some of the classic books of literature and plays and all kinds of great things. So can you write a paragraph or two about having to choose between two desires? So you could write a real simple one about like, I'd like to lose weight, but actually I also really like chocolate, right? That would be one thing. But you could also write about something that's a little deeper than that. So, and the example right there is the cartoon of the United States. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men, but also war, ammunition for sale, orders will, right? The push and pull of the heart, the wish for two opposing things. Okay, did anyone have questions or thoughts?
No.
Not on that one actually, for now. That thing with the celery really triggered me.
The thing with the what?
With the celery, that thing triggered me.
Oh.
I could imagine a guy going to the fridge and smelling a celery and biting an apple and putting it back.
Yes, I know. It's okay. So I love that, right? When a writer can take you right into that moment so you can see it. You're viscerally there. You're experiencing it with all the senses, that guy biting into the celery, for example. Right? That's like, I live for that. I love that so much. It gets me very excited when I see that in your work, in my work, in a book that I'm reading, whatever. Whoever can do that. Like Raduca did that with the tomatoes, her grandmother's tomatoes. I was there. I loved that. It was awesome. So if you have questions, you know where I am, hopefully.
Okay.
It was great.
Come
with ideas. Do your homework. I want to be able to talk with you about it. It's much more fun talking about your work than just like random stuff that Raymond Carver wrote, no matter how good it is.
So for the classes going forward, go on, Raphael.
I think on that one I will have some ideas that are going up. I like strange things.
Yeah. Raduca, go ahead. Sorry.
So I think, and that's because other things will wrap up for me. But should we continue 2 more classes that we can count on, and maybe 1 extra, but certainly 2 more to go? So just to give you a bit of a plan of what else can you cover, Goldie?
Yeah, so I would like to, in the next 2 weeks, if we have another 2 weeks, I don't know if you guys wanted to do that or not, but if we do have another 2 weeks, I wanted to kind of work on this idea more strongly. Like each class leads into the next class, hopefully, right? So what I'd really like to do is examine what you come up with on this idea, the push and pull between two desires, two equal desires. You want this, you want that. And to see if we could develop whatever story you come up with that, see if we can push that forward using the things that we've learned. I'd really like to see you guys develop a dialogue about these conflicting desires and your character that's conflicted by them, and talk about that a little bit in the way that we talked about some of the work last week. I was hoping that we'd have more work this week so that we could do that again, but we didn't. So I really like it when you do some writing and hand it in, because then we get to kind of talk about those experiments and see what worked, what didn't work. Again, with gentle pause, not with, claws out. Gentle discussion about like how stories works better if it's about your work instead of Raymond Carver's work. He's great, but it's not so helpful to you guys when you're trying to do your own work. It's more helpful if we talk about your work. So
that sounds right. So, okay, we'll meet again next week at the same time. Thank you so much, Goldie, for...
Nice.
A pleasure. It's always great to see you guys. Bye.
Thank you.